Rauh was fermenting ingredients in these jars to brew alcohol. An investigation into the nature of these ingredients reveals that Rauh's civilization was using these concoctions to treat pain, manipulate memory, and send people to eternal slumber as a form of euthanasia. These practices were referred to as sprite medicine, aka spirit medicine. The black syrup, Tialie's concoction, scorpion stew, celestial dew, and Seluvis's potion are all modern versions of these ancient recipes. The black syrup is actually a tequila, wine, and scorpion cocktail developed by Rauh to treat their patients. And I've created a real-life version of this drink recipe you can make yourself. In this episode, we're going to investigate the history of Rauh's spirit medicine. Today's video is sponsored by Quantum Marmalade. Here is sweet, kind, generous Moor. Moor is one of the forager brood, who gather useful things together for their allies. The forager brood are described as non-human, and the other members we meet are kindred of rot. The kindred of rot worship the god of rot. But while most kindred of rot we see worship the dangerous scarlet rot which eats away at flesh, Moor and the forager brood demonstrate the usefulness of rot. It has the ability to create new useful materials and substances. Almost every forager brood cookbook describes how to create a pickled item. This is because the forager brood's pickled delights are enhanced by the fermentation, aka rotting, of the ingredients. When we meet him near Bellerot, Moor appears to be putting things into a jar with the same design as those we find in the Rauh ruins. The jars are clearly important, just look at how many of them there are. Rauh doesn't have that many remaining artifacts, and these jars seem to have been a big part of their civilization. Moor using one of these jars to meld ingredients in a process of rotting could be a clue that Rauh was using their jars for a similar process, which suggests that their culture had a nuanced, positive relationship with rot. As part of their joint questline, Moor can give you the item black syrup to give to Tialie. Black syrup is an ebony black syrup held in an unglazed jar. An unknown liquid apparently gathered and aged by the forager brood. The game specifically calls out the jar's unglazed design. We get this jar from Moor, and Moor is using a jar from Rauh. The jars have similar shapes, and it looks like the jar depicted in the Antiquity Scholar's Cookbook, which was written by Hornsent studying the Rauh ruins. If you look closely, you can just barely see the same design as seen on Rauh's jars. Perhaps the stuff in this jar and the recipe to make it were learned from Rauh. Tialie says this about the black syrup. It's wonderful, this ebony, as lustrous as the night sky unending. When prompted, if you tell him that you're weary of life, he'll offer you an elixir he's created, Tialie's concoction. He tells us that this elixir will grant the sweetest slumber for all eternity. Tialie and his questline are likely reworked versions of the base game cut content NPC, Rico, a man also searching for Miquella in St. Trina. As the famous Game of Thrones quote goes, "What is cut may never die, but is modified and put in the DLC." Rico is an interesting NPC. His faith is in alcohol, and he says the study of alcohol is but another form of worship. Given how many players are under the legal drinking age, it's no wonder that he was cut. Rico asks you to collect slumber fog, which he uses to craft dream brew, and he talks about dream brew like it's alcohol. Tialie's concoction and Rico's dream brew seem similar in nature. Tialie's grants slumber, while Rico's is made from slumber fog. Both versions of slumber are likened to sinking into a sea. Tialie says he wishes to doze off into the sea of St. Trina. Rico says we collect slumber fog from those submerged in the deepest sleep, those merry fools sunk so low they will not awaken. Rico refers to dream brew as the nectar of the demigods, while Tialier uses the phrase velvety ambrosia. In Greek myth, ambrosia is the food of the gods. Rico says, secrets are like fine wine. The longer they mature in the dark, the richer the flavor. The black syrup was gathered and aged by the forager brood. Aging is the process of storing distilled alcohols in barrels for a period of time to improve their flavor and taste. This implies that the black syrup, like dream brew, is alcohol. And what this means is that this jar is actually an ancient solo cup. This finally explains what the fire sprite stones were used for, playing beer pong. And Rauh is actually a frat house. Alcohol is made by fermenting some sort of plant. By figuring out what ingredients were used to make this concoction, we can understand its nature, and by extension, what Rauh was using it for. So, what plants were Rauh fermenting to make the black syrup? The first suspect is fermented Nectarblood Bergeons. However, I think we can write them off immediately as they have an alibi. The version of slumber that is granted by Tialier's concoction is not the same slumber as St. Trina's. As the concoction's description says, Tialier thought of St. Trina's sleep when he created this, but the ebony sleep he concocted had not the sweetness of nectar nor the gentleness of rest's embrace. The concoction is missing the sweetness of the nectar and the gentleness of St. Trina. It's also ebony black, not velvety purple, though the icon art itself is a purple black. Tialier gives us the concoction before departing to the deep purple garden where the Nectarblood Bergeons are found, suggesting that this purple color comes from something else, another ingredient which we'll discuss shortly. Regardless, the resulting mixture did not grant the type of sleep that he thought it would. It seems that not all versions of slumber are equivalent. Instead, I think the effect of sleep comes from fermented Dewgems. The Dewgem is a succulent plant that is supped on night-tinged dew. At first, it seemed like Dewgems had an alibi. Google told me that you cannot ferment succulent plants. However, then I remembered tequila. Tequila is made from agave tequilana, aka agave azul, aka blue agave, a succulent plant which has enough fructose in its branches to extract blue agave syrup, which can be fermented into tequila. Blue syrup, black syrup. However, like the jars from before, we don't have a perfect match, as this is what agave tequilana looks like. It has very pointy branches. But other agave plants look nearly identical to the Dewgem, so much so that I think we are meant to believe that the Dewgem's design is based on them. Dewgem's main property is that it has supped on night-tinged dew. If I put a bunch of Dewgems into a jar, ferment and age them, what I would get is refined essence of night. Night is dark, one could call it black. Talking about the black syrup, Tialier says, "It's wonderful, this ebony, as lustrous as the night sky unending." Night-tinged dew is likely imbued with the essence of the spirits of the dead, aka spirits in slumber going through their phase of night. Dewgems grow by the waterside and sup on this night-tinged dew, suggesting that the dew itself is the river water. The water could be night-tinged because it's infused with the spiritual essence of dead bodies given water burials, or perhaps because it flows through places like the gravesite plain, land which is imbued with the spirits of the dead. The essence of slumbering spirits, refined and concentrated, could in theory create a potion that allows one to enter an eternal slumber, like how Rico needed many slumber fog to make one dream brew. What I think this means is that Rauh was harvesting Dewgems, extracting night-tinged dew, aka blue syrup, from them, and using it to make a tequila one could call Essence of Night. With enough tequila, you can put a human to sleep. But this tequila is so potent that it could put even an ancient dragon to sleep. More on that later. Most crafting recipes involve more than one ingredient, and with all this talk of wine and alcohol and aging, I would be remiss not to bring up the Rauh fruit. Wine is made from fermented grapes. Rauh fruit is berry-like red fruit that grows in shrubs, like grapes, can be dried into a raisin form, like grapes, and look like grapes. Though it looks different, Rada fruit is functionally identical to Rauh fruit. It's also berry-like, indigestible by humans, and can be dried into a spirit raisin form to feed to Torrent. As a spirit horse, he may benefit from some spiritual property of the fruit. Their usage in modern day by the forager brood, and the pattern of Rauh names tracing back to Rauh, makes me believe it was known to them at the time and used in their recipes. Rada fruit could have been another ingredient needed for the black syrup. It's also purple, which could explain where the purple coloring in Tialier's concoction came from. Rada fruit has a bitter taste, its bitterness being a sign of potent spirituality. It grows into spirit grave grass, and the spirit raisin was thought to enhance one's spirituality. If the Dewgem brought the night aspect, the Rada fruit could have brought the spirit aspect, and a draft created using both would have been a potent night spirit concoction. An ingredient of spiritual essence may be required so that the resulting concoction will be able to affect the drinker's spirit and put it into slumber. Yes, what I am suggesting is that the black syrup is a cocktail whose recipe involves mixing tequila and wine. If you think that's a wild drink, let's talk about the final ingredient. The game definitely wanted us to believe that the black syrup could have been related to the scorpion stew, which is scorpion simmered in a black soup. Both are black substances, their names sound similar, and the same pattern that's around the lid of the bowl is on the page of the Antiquities Scholar's cookbook next to Rauh's jar. However, the soup boosts physical damage negation and gradually restores HP. It has nothing to do with sleep, so we know it's not the same recipe. But the recipe does seem to have some origin in Rauh, and the key ingredient seems to be scorpion. Scorpion liver is an ingredient in the pickled liver items, which also boost damage negation. However, the livers that are pickled are actually the beast liver item, which explicitly states that it boosts damage negation. The scorpion liver is referred to as a liver, but no one is quite sure of its purpose, and it's a delicacy known for its numbing toxins. The importance of the scorpion liver seems to be its ability to numb pain, which is why it's a key ingredient in the well-pickled turtleneck, which increases endurance. There are a ton of spider scorpions in the Rauh ruins. I think they were kept here like cattle to be farmed for their livers, which were used by Rauh to brew potions to relieve pain. So far, we haven't identified an ingredient that would make our black syrup recipe black. But the scorpions are black, and the scorpion stew is a black soup, so it might be that the black part of the black syrup is the scorpion liver, which added a pain-relieving effect to the black syrup. The end result would be a euthanasia potion that works in a painless manner. Before we get to the final recipe, there's one thing we need to address. Grandam says that she invented the scorpion stew. My best explanation for this is that Grandam may have been one of the Hornsent who had studied the Rauh ruins. In their quest to reverse engineer what Rauh had been doing, she created the scorpion stew recipe, inspired by the scorpions in their ruins and the remains of black liquid that she found in their jars. Her recipe involves simmering the scorpion, a process which breaks down and melds ingredients similar to fermentation. This is what Rauh was doing with their jars, but there's no evidence that they were heating them, despite all the calderas in their ruins, which appear to have been used for light. This is supported by the fact that the black syrup is in an unglazed jar. Heat is what could have made Grandam's recipe unique. Before we get to the final recipe, a brief message from today's sponsor, Quantum Marmalade, an indie sci-fi comic about dark science, twisted biochemistry, and awesome explosions. Danny Walker's the writer and was very inspired by Elden Ring. The story's namesake, for example, refers to a mysterious alien tree that can absorb consciousness, a sci-fi parallel to the Crucible's spiritual absorption, as well as Marika's Erd tree. I've read Quantum Marmalade and love the depth of its world building. The link is in the description below. Please check it out and be sure to pick up the new chapters on Kickstarter. There's even special early bird pricing for a limited number of backers. Thus, this is what I believe is the recipe for the black syrup. Gather Dewgems, Rada fruit, and scorpion liver, and age them in an unglazed jar. Tialier's concoction is a condensed version of this. For funsies, I've created an IRL recipe for the black syrup, aka Essence of Night. 1.5 ounces Jose Cuervo Blue Agave Silver Tequila to represent our fermented Dewgems. 1 ounce of Apothic Dark Red Wine to represent our fermented Rada fruit. A few drops of Bennett's Scorpion Bitters to represent our scorpion liver. And 3/4 ounces of simple syrup to represent the syrup part of the black syrup, but mainly so it doesn't taste like shit. This is a lore-accurate drink. Don't expect it to be the best thing you've ever tasted. Hypothesizing that this black syrup dates back to Rauh's civilization, what were they doing with it? Dewgems were said to have been used in the practice of sprite medicine long ago. Rauh was the civilization known to have worked with sprites, and we find a ton of Dewgems in the ancient ruins. Sprite really just means spirit, so Rauh was practicing spirit medicine. The spirit raisin is described as a bitter medicine, and every item we craft in the game that is pickled in a medicinal solution uses 3 to 5 Rauh fruit or Rada fruit. It seems like Rauh was using what they refined in these jars as medicine. Dream Brew and Tialier's concoction both put people into an eternal slumber, a form of death, a sleep from which they will never wake up. This could be viewed as a form of euthanasia to provide to the terminally ill or fatally injured on the battlefield, or those that have simply grown weary from life. There is precedent for this practice in the game. The perfumers are referred to as physicians, aka practitioners of medicine, and mix concoctions in their flasks, similar to what Rauh was doing with their jars. Perfumer Trisha treated Omen, Misbegotten, and others seen as impure. She was their companion as they died, watching over them to ensure that they could pass peacefully, free of pain. She may have accomplished this with a potion similar to Dream Brew or Tialier's concoction, allowing her patients to drift off gently into an eternal slumber. This practice fits with Rauh's connection to night, as we discussed in the Night and Flame video. As stewards of the spiritual energy cycle, guiding the journey of the spirit through life, death, and rebirth, they may have helped that process along by allowing suffering people an option to send their spirit to an eternal slumber, using a potion that is essentially a refined essence of night. For an eternal spirit, this really is the only form of rest. I don't think that Rauh's sprite medicine only involved brewing euthanasia potions. Night-tinged dew is similar to something we've heard of before, celestial dew, also known as a night tear. Tear, dew, and sap are all used interchangeably in the base game, so another name for this could be night dew. It even has the same blue color as the Dewgems, and its item description mentions the night sky. Celestial dew can be used to reverse NPC antagonization at the Church of Vows, in essence making an NPC forget what happened. To perform absolution, we kneel in this pool of water in front of a Nox statue holding a bowl, and cleanse ourselves with the celestial dew in a baptismal-like ceremony. Baptism is a form of rebirth, And the juvenile scholar set tells us that rebirth is as sleep. With each awakening, memory fades to oblivion. This ceremony of rebirth is a ceremony of sleep, and awakening causes us and the NPC we've aggroed to forget what happened. The celestial dew, aka night dew, is what causes this forgetting, and thus I would theorize that this means it's imbued with the power of sleep, and its medicinal property is to make one forget. Maybe we don't fall asleep because we don't actually drink it, or perhaps it's refined in a way that only causes forgetting. Maybe forgetting is what drinking Seluvis's potion does. If you give Seluvis's potion to Nefeli Lu or the Dung Eater, after drinking it they will become a puppet, seemingly alive but with no personality, memory, or will. It's a tonic of bluish-black, similar in color to the Dewgem and Celestial Dew. It's made from starlight shards, which were used by the Eternal City to make intoxicating drafts, which sounds suspiciously like alcohol. Starlight shards even have a pale blue glow, like the Dewgems glow blue at night. Most puppets' eyes are hidden behind masks, but we can see that Dolores's eyes are actually closed. It seems like Seluvis's potion puts people into a form of sleep like the other night-tinged dew-derived potions. Like being baptized with the celestial dew causes one to forget, those who drink Seluvis's potion seem to forget everything, allowing them to become a puppet. Both Rauh and the Nox are connected to night and water, and I think it's likely that the Nox are descendants of Rauh. It's possible that they inherited the knowledge of night-tinged dew from their ancestors. Flowing water was used as a purification ritual in Japanese Shinto religion, and Rauh was all about flowing water. So perhaps even this baptismal ceremony, this miracle, dates back to Rauh. Alternatively, the Nox could have just rediscovered this knowledge from their own study of water and spirits. Regardless, the parallel suggests that Rauh may have been using night-tinged dew to allow people to go to sleep and help them forget pain, loss, and antagonization. This could have been another way that Rauh's physicians were treating their patients. Muriel tells us that this process will restore any bond, however strained or severed, to its rightful state of harmony. In the Rauh ruins, we find a mysterious item called a bond stone, which mentions how bonds with sprites, aka spirits, were made to be broken. Bond stones break bonds. Celestial dew, aka night-tinged dew, restores bonds. I don't think this is a coincidence, and I think this suggests that Rauh had an understanding of how to manipulate spiritual bonds, and doing so was key to their practice of sprite medicine. We've painted the following picture of what Rauh was doing. Rauh's physicians were brewing euthanasia potions that could send eternal spirits into a painless slumber. This sleep functions as a form of rebirth, which has the ability to make one forget. Mild forms of Dewgem-derived sleep potions like the Celestial Dew could have done this, perhaps in a baptismal-like water purification ritual that Rauh may have invented. Part of their spirit medicine involved breaking bonds, which causes pain, but they also knew how to manipulate memory and forgetting in order to mend those bonds. They were also likely brewing potions with scorpion livers which could numb pain. A large part of spirit medicine seems to involve the treatment of pain. The connection of Rauh to pain helps us explain another thing in the Rauh ruins. All these blood fiends. The blood fiends worship the formless mother, and as we know, the mother of truth desires a wound. That is, she desires pain and blood sacrifice. Their placement here suggests that Rauh has some sort of connection to the formless mother and her worship in the form of pain and sacrifice. Some people have suggested that Rauh was a polytheistic culture worshipping many gods. Based on their understanding of the principles of flowing water, stagnation, and rot, it seemed like they were a wise culture that had an understanding of how to remain in balance with natural forces. If this connection to the Formless Mother is legit, I think it means that Rauh knew how to cause pain, but also how to alleviate it. This is what spirit medicine is. With everything we know now about the effects of slumber and the nature of the black syrup and Tialie's concoction, we can understand better the transactional relationship between Placidusax and Florisax. After Florisax drinks Tialie's concoction and falls asleep, she's distraught because she has succumbed to the deep slumber that was meant for her lord. This phrasing suggests that the concoction's effects are the same as what she offers to Placidusax. Both grant deep slumber. As we've uncovered, Rauh's slumber potions were brewed to grant rest, alleviate pain, and cause forgetting. Tialie only gives us his concoction if we tell him that we're weary of life. It seems that Placidusax may be weary of life as well. The remembrance of the Dragon Lord tells us that once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Placidusax waits beyond time for his god to return. As an immortal ancient dragon, an eternal spirit, he has no rest, no escape from his reality beyond receiving the sleep that Florisax offers. Interestingly, she says she specifically offers him her solace, so that it may grant him sleep. Solace is comfort in a time of distress or sadness. It seems what Placidusax really wants is relief from the pain of his loneliness and the ability to forget his lost love, if only for a short while. While they aren't the same, there's this intentional parallel between the slumber that Florisax gives to Placidusax and Tialie's concoction, which is an incredibly alcoholic drink. What Placidusax wants is the same thing that humans use alcohol for. He has a broken heart, and he wants to get drunk and forget that pain for a little while. I think many of us out there can understand that pain and that drive to drink because of it. But, as we know, the ebony sleep Tialie concocted had not the sweetness of nectar, nor the gentleness of rest's embrace. The slumber one gets from an alcoholic sleep does not grant one rest. It saps energy and often ruins the next day. It also does very little to mend a broken heart, besides allowing you to ignore the pain. It's also unhealthy to find solace in another in some sort of transactional relationship, but it's another common strategy used to mend heartbreak. I feel like I can't judge Placidusax too much. For an ancient dragon, he acts all too human. If you enjoyed this video and feel that it contributes positively to the Elden Ring community, please leave a like to help boost its visibility within YouTube's algorithm. To support the channel, please subscribe. My fellow Tarnished, thank you for watching. See you in the next video.